Okay, Liberation Day, April the 2nd. And then a series of policies before that made Americans believe that Trump's coming after the deep state, while he strategically aligned all the things that will weaken the dollar and get the ability to go long Bitcoin and short the dollar. Create all of that setup is exactly what's happening as we speak. So Liberation Day comes along. Now, remember, Trump was installed because there was an alternative model to World War III. Military-industrial complex lost. Banks won. Banks redeployed capital to a BRICS-aligned vision of the world where GCC invests the money and reverses the IMF. Trump gets all of his investments along those, all of his lawfare goes away, all of his Epstein stuff goes away. The assassination attempts happen. He gets installed. And then all of a sudden, you get the tariff policy because for 35 years, he's been talking about tariffs. And he has what no one else has, a cult-like following that will buy into whatever he says, even if it makes no sense whatsoever. So I've been going across spaces, telling people the truth, you know, from 25 years study. You know, I mean, it's funny, right? Random people on X want to argue, and I'm not trying to be arrogant. When I don't know a subject, I don't know a subject. But I did my economics masters. I worked in investment banking, in trading, corporate finance, stockbroking. I've been involved in monetary reform my entire adult life. I spent 25 years, day after day after day, obsessing over nothing but understanding the game of money. Involved in Bitcoin conference, wrote the first published book in the world to include Bitcoin, invested in over 100 companies that became the largest multi-billion-dollar unicorns in our industry, created a company that's the longest standing company in Bitcoin. I'm not trying to brag, but I know my subject. And consistently get people ahead of trends because I'm following the money rather than the usual shit that they taught me in my economics degrees. And yet when I say something, they want to fight and think that they know more. Now it's all good. I like pushback. I like people that have arguments. I'm more than happy to admit when I'm wrong, but I know this subject and I've got a track record. It's the future that judges whether I'm right or wrong. And most people call me a conspiracy theorist at the time, then say, how did you get me ahead of that? And then it was obvious. And I said that anyway. That's happened my whole adult career. Anyway, it's funny how they want to debate it. So I'm telling them what the impact of these tariffs will be. They're telling me, no, it can't be. Stop talking conspiracy theories. Well, let's have a look. I've been warning people all along of what these tariffs would do. And it's doing everything that it said. So suddenly, China, which by the way only exports 10% of its 10 to 15% of its exports to America, they've got massive reserves and they can handle it. They don't have a Federal Reserve; they have a state banking system. So the over leveraging of debt is just narrative. They've got debt, of course. They've got real estate problems, but they have the ability to sustain itself, and they have a population that is not arguing over left and right politics. They're unified around the vision of being, you know, the next power because China's been investing in their education, investing in their infrastructure. Yes, they have wealth inequality. Yes, they have demographic issues. Yes, they are authoritarian, but that's just a psyop to distract you from what they've actually been doing. Because now China can survive the whole trade. There is no tariff war. There is no trade war. China has already won. This was the execution of the strategy as an alternative to World War III. China is no longer buying American beef. It's buying its beef from Australia. So Australia benefits, China benefits. China is no longer buying American soybeans. It's buying its soybeans from Brazil. Brazil, Russia, India, China, BRICS. So Brazil benefits, China benefits, there's no issue. China is no longer buying its Boeing airplanes. It's essentially buying Airbuses. And sorry, I don't know too much about this, but and making comments. So it's making its own. So it is got the industrial base already to build its own, align with other military partners in BRICS like Russia. And what's happening with America? America can't just suddenly rebuild its manufacturing base. It still needs to import these goods. And who pays the tariffs? the importer. So China can just pivot away. There's nothing that it depends. In fact, if it stops importing iPhones, it can push Huawei. If it stops using any of this technology that's so-called dependent, it's already got superior artificial intelligence, superior robotics, 10G instead of 5G. It's already got it's been investing multi-decades in preparation, knowing that this event would happen, building sovereign wealth, building vast gold reserves. I mean, they want you to believe that China only is the 7th largest holder of gold with only 2,500 tons. Are you crazy? Estimates through the different, they don't disclose it for a reason, but the estimates are about 22,500 tons. If you believe that list, Saudi Arabia is not even in the top 10 gold holders. If you believe that Saudi Arabia hasn't built vast gold reserves, then I've got a lovely war to sell you with Iran, and the military industrial complex will love that war, and they'll make you think that it's doing it to make America great again. You got to wake up to this. So the US suddenly gets economic warning signs are emerging. So this week, what did we have? We had a decline in American GDP. Now, I'm not saying China's insulated from this. This will create a global recession, no doubt. But who benefits from that global recession? We'll deconstruct it for those that want to follow the money and engage in reality rather than patriotism and being led to be slaughtered. By believing what you're being told. So GDP declined. Economic output has essentially declined by 0.3%. Now, I don't want to mislead you. There's a reason for that, because people like Apple that knew what was going to happen, they were front running the tariffs and they were loading up billions of semiconductor chips so that they don't have to pay the tariffs. And so they were front running that, which creates a bit more of a deficit, which creates negative growth because they've been getting ready. They've got all the inventory, the small to medium sized businesses. They don't have the inventory and they're paying the tariffs. Apple's not paying the tariffs. Apple's negotiating all the deals because it's got factories everywhere. It will say, okay, I'll take some of our goods that were in China and I'll build it in India. And then India will get a clip and then China will sell it to India anyway. And who's investing in the factories in India? China. Who's investing in the factories in Mexico? China. Just actually follow the money. Step into common sense, corner people, and understanding what is actually happening here. So, right, we don't know whether that's going to be a recession. It's 0.3% growth. We could get an increase in that for next quarter, but maybe not. So I'm not going to mislead you, but the data is saying that is moving towards negative growth. 2 quarters of negative growth is called a recession. Now, what about payroll growth? Payroll growth, the figures that came out, that's slowing down. So people are getting paid less. Job creation has dropped to 62,000. That's basically indicating a cooling off of the labor market. What else is that? So when you have negative growth and unemployment, what's the third part, the third factor? Well, you need to start looking at wages. Are wages going at the same time? And is consumption increasing? So this is the figure that was fairly good. So people are still taking their credit cards and buying, but who does most of the consuming? The consuming is led by the top 10% of Americans, i.e. the wealthy. So the wealthy is still consuming and everyone else is cutting back. So consumption was falling. Consumer spending decreased by 1.8%, down from 4%. So it's still positive, but it's down from 4%. What about prices? So Trump came out and said prices are down. Yes, oil prices has come down. What about drill, baby, drill? Drill, baby, drill was supporting the oil companies. Negative oil prices sends the small oil producers bankrupt, drives money over to the GCC countries. Work through the logic here. Yes, it gets inflation down, but what have we got with inflation? The GDP price index, it went up to 3.7%, which is up from 2.3% in 2024. So we're now at 3.7% rather than 2.4%. The goal was to get to 2%. More likely, I always predicting that it's going to systemically stay at 3%. And now it's being forecasted to stay at 3.7%. Now, all of this is happening before the impact of the tariffs is actually factored in. You've got a 6 months lag to figure out in the data what the actual effect of this will be. So before the full impact of laying off 200,000 people from the government and the full impact of these tariffs where small businesses can't get the goods they need and don't have the margin, this is the data. So this is early signs, and I'm not saying we're there yet, but it is early signs that when you have declining employment, declining growth, and increasing inflation, that is called stagflation. And stagflation is the economic environment of the 1970s, and that is the worst of all worlds. So what is causing this, and what is the real policy? Well, remember, if you're familiar with Bitcoin Hard Talk, you'll know that we'll say America needs a monetary reform. You can't fix a monetary issue, a Federal Reserve debt-based Ponzi scheme, with tax reform. But you can fool people into believing that it will fix it with tax. And so what is the idea? The idea is that you create carnage. And this is what I've been covering in previous episodes. So you say tariffs on, tariffs off, Powell on, Powell off. We're taking on the central bank. We're not taking on the central bank. He's got his job. He doesn't have his job. We're working with India. We're not working with India. Hey, Japan, we'll give you a deal. No, we're not going to give you a deal. This is all about strategically weakening the dollar, having capital outflows, and making it where it's not possible to work with America, because that is the strategy. Because the banks that back Trump have a different vision of the world, a technocracy, which is a stateless world, a banking multipolar order, because World War III wasn't going to be profitable. And Trump is giving as much strategic leverage through Adelson to Israel, because the Middle East is about to enter into a negotiation, and it wants to give strategic power to Israel as it negotiates with the real power, Saudi Arabia and those with sovereign wealth. And at the same time, you economically destroy Israel, Europe, Britain, and America. And you asset strip everything you can, and that's exactly what's happening right now. So this is about creating peak volatility. Peak volatility benefits those that are close to the Trump administration, that have those hedge funds, and it allows the hedge funds connected to the insider trade in a deregulated environment with an SEC change to be able to make a shit ton of money and wipe out the smaller ones that are trying to speculate the market, the small funds, so they can consolidate power amongst the people that own the administration, because America has been securitized and the political process is owned by the lobby group. There is no accident that this volatility is happening. And some people are trying to use 5D gymnastics to say the art of the deal, the art of the deal. He's going to be doing a deal. He's going to be announcing it. I mean, come on, doing a trade deal with China would take at least 3 years to negotiate. At least. And we're at the stage where China's saying, should we have a meeting? It's all theatrics. See through the theatrics. This has all been predetermined already. The money's already moving. Why do you think gold was at all-time highs? Why do you think these things are happening? And if you think this is a recovery, and then suddenly the Fed's going to do QE, this is not business as usual, my friends. We'll keep watching and we're doing the covering. The QE is not going to happen. If it does, I'll tell you what I believe the strategy to be. But my bet is that the QE is not going to happen, because this is the strategy. And you need to position yourself accordingly. It's essentially a corporate raiders and a hedge funds dream. That's what Trump tariffs are. Small businesses, Main Street, those that are over leveraged, they become, they get wiped out. They become the breed. Wall Street, private equity, the hedge funds, they're the ones feeding. They're the ones getting the distressed assets. They're the ones that are negotiating deals with the Trump administration. So if you wanted to weaken the dollar and try and pretend that it's a good thing to make America great again, what would you do? Let's go through some of the policies. The first thing you do is you'd say, we're taking on the deep state. because I'm the outsider that is taking on the deep state. And so what do? You shut down USAID. What is USAID? It is a mechanism for propping up the proof of weapons network using covert wars and terrorism. It funds ISIS training camps, Al-Qaeda training camps, to create militias that raid countries so that America can steal assets and hand it over to the large corporations like M23 in Congo. And it props up the petrodollar. And it was the colonial British Empire that made to neo-colonialism through the American Empire to force oil to be priced in dollars. USAID was an essential part of those covert war apparatus. So you're essentially taking down the petrodollar, because the petrodollar is now doing deals. Saudi is doing deals with China outside the dollar. It's starting to normalize with Iran and do deals outside of the dollar. It's starting to go through different, it was essentially even sending. You even get an Iran that was exporting oil to India. Russia was sending it to India. India was sending it to Europe, which created the environment that sent Europe into a recession so that America and the deep state and the CIA could destroy the manufacturing base. It also had United Nations, which is essentially an American puppet organization to pretend that America is serving crimes against humanity while it veto votes against anyone fighting against the American system. So if you're an African leader and you're in Congo and you want to say America is funding militia groups and stealing our resources via Rwanda and Uganda, then America gets to veto vote away from it. And they can also use the United Nations in order to prop up, euro dollar, petrodollar as well. So this is strategically weakening the dollar. What about NATO? NATO, you get Zelensky to come in, you create a fight with him, you do some theatrics, you get to say, hey, we're going to negotiate with Putin. While in the meantime, you're negotiating your rare earth deals, and your rare earth deals is negotiating for the minerals you need for Elon Musk's electric vehicle batteries and Apple's iPhones and laptops, and the semiconductor chips you need for Palantir's artificial intelligence warfare and drone technology, and Lavender and surveillance technology, and Elon's social credit score, which is all going to be integrated into these stable coins, so that in case you rebel, you're going to end up like Europe, where they can manufacture civil unrest, use the narratives that they use. These narratives were where USAID was used in order to control the BBC, control the Ukrainian media, control CNN and Fox, dumb down Americans, dumb down Brits, dumb down Europeans, where they think they're fighting for democracy, raiding, waving Israeli and Ukrainian flags, being good, useful idiots for the profits of the military-industrial complex at the expense of your own people, while they use that to strategically kill people. That's how the proof of weapons network works. Then what do you do if you really want to weaken the dollar? You say, I'm going to fire the Fed. You take away independence of the... Now, we know that the Fed isn't independent. We know how the structure works. If you watch Bitcoin Hard Talk, the Fed has shareholders. Those shareholders are the banks. And the banks use lobby money in order to control the politicians. So Trump and Jerome Powell both work for the same people. They create a fake fight. That fake fight says, hey, we don't want independence of the Federal Reserve is a bedrock of the dollar. This is going very funky. This feels like it's not the America that we were stable capital investing in. And what if you wanted to give the ultimate gift for crashing the dollar at the exact strategic moment that you wanted to? You would say that we're gonna audit Fort Knox. And if the audit is not in line with the gold there, and it turns out that it's owned by the Fed and it collateralized, then that's the tool you need. You can have inflation is transitory, get the Fed to do it if you want to blame them, or you can blame the Trump administration and say, we'll audit the gold and we can strategically, do that. So this is because they don't work for Americans, they work for the banks. So kill the petrodollar, because now more and more trades are happening between Saudi Arabia and Russia and China in local currencies. The sanctions were the mechanism for drawing all the BRICS, the Gulf countries all together. They all unify because of geopolitical reasons. And then rather than go to World War III, you end up in this game. And so you set a couple of games. We'll be covering that in the geopolitical section. Kill the euro dollar. NATO is just a sales strategy for companies. And so you can try and scrape. You can get the European Central Bank to print $1 trillion, steal 350 billion from Russia, and then use that in order to get into military contractors, get your last bit, and then weaken the relationship or strengthen the euro relative to the dollar. And then you negotiate your rare earth deals and everything that they've been announcing. I'm sorry, don't shoot the messenger. I'm sorry they lied to you. What was the announcement that we had today? The announcement we had today was that Trump would like to sanction anybody that imports oil from Iran, i.e., China. And is America going to sanction China? Well, if they did, remember, only 10 to 15% of exports come from America. This would destroy the over-leveraged American economy. It would lead it to the types of negotiations that we're seeing right now. So Trump comes out and says, we're negotiating with 200 countries. We're going to make MAGA great again. What are they negotiating? They're negotiating deals for the large financial and multinational corporations that are asset stripping America. These deals ain't going to help you. Look at the Panama Canal. He was negotiating for BlackRock, not for you, not for Americans. And that was negotiating against China. And we'll see what happens. But these different types of deals, it's all about asset stripping Americans, just as the EU is asset stripping Europeans right now. He even said they're negotiating with 200 countries, even though there's only 193 countries in the United Nations. So suddenly he's found 7 more countries to negotiate with, and apparently they're all doing those negotiations. But remember, the importer pays the tax. The world reserve currency means you need to export dollars. Exporting dollars means you need to run trade deficits and fiscal deficits in order to create those dollars, which is why the debt's there. And if you want to rebalance that, you need to go into an economic destruction mode and not be the world reserve currency anymore. So if Trump achieves the goal of bringing back the manufacturing base, who's going to do that manufacturing? If you don't want iPhones to cost $10,000, you either put them in India and then you create an arbitrage trade, or you bring them to America and you increase the price tenfold. But what's America going to do? They're going to do it with robotics. That's not going to help Main Street. That's not going to create jobs. That's going to eliminate jobs. That's going to set up the environment with a stablecoin technocracy for a stablecoin standard. It's all being framed as bringing back the manufacturing base. The only manufacturing that will come back is robotics, building AI, data centers, and military weapons for the, that's what all technological innovation in America has essentially been. The military creates it. They hand it over to an entrepreneur like Elon when they want you to have it. But all of the technology was created for military, for killing, for propping up the dollar through this USAID, IMF, proof of weapons network. So now maybe that's not useful anymore because banks have won over military and they want America to no longer to be the world's military. So then you disrupt that model and you build the technocracy within America. And that's exactly what's happening right now. And then you get all the deals in favor for the large corporations are going to be asset stripping. And then they're going to be redeploying that capital abroad and setting a new world order and a new profit structure based upon the multipolar world order that we'll discuss today. If America wanted to rebuild its manufacturing base, firstly, it would have to bring in all of this, the stuff. And didn't he say anti-immigration? Suddenly that's going to pivot to, we'll do legal immigration from India. Is that what the policy was? Wasn't that what created a lot of problems with the H-1B visa controversy? And at the same time, aren't they deporting people not because they're deporting illegal immigrants, but because they're using their First Amendment right in order to protest against universities sending money for a genocide? and that puts you in Guantanamo Bay and deported to a prison in El Salvador, that's how you create civil unrest. It would take decades to rebuild the manufacturing base. I'm sorry, they're lying to you. It's actually the strategy of the proof of weapons network, because the proof of weapons network controls Europe, controls America. And when we go through the geopolitical section, we'll talk about what the implications are in the Middle East and how that goes as well. US will still be buying from China because it needs to for years to come. China will not be buying from America because it doesn't have to buy. And where it has to buy, the large corporations will get the exemptions, and that's all that's happening. This is just like COVID. It is an attack on Main Street for Wall Street. Now, when that capital goes out of America, it's going to be building up the global south. So this is not economic destruction. The world is not over. You just need to understand the monetary flows. This is massive opportunity for large corporations are going to be buying all of these distressed export-driven countries like Vietnam and all their assets. But then there's going to be a redeployment of capital when America no longer creates war. And that will be investing in countries like the global south, like Africa, like the countries like Philippines, you know, that have been essentially become military conduits, like Latin America, like those that were raped, pillaged, and stolen from through these covert wars, you know, and various other Asian countries, where the Asian countries, they're going to get significant investment. They're going to be asset stripped and investment as well. So there will be redeployment of capital, and who deploys that? BlackRock, the proof of weapons network, and they'll be constructing those products through JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs because they're not America first institutions. They're global. Everything helps China. Yeah, the global recession will hit it, but everything this makes China stronger, America weaker. And people are literally like commenting on tweets saying, we're taking on China. China is bowing down to Trump. I mean, come on. We got to deal in reality here. Follow the money, not the narratives. China has trade surplus. China has a state banking system. China can replace US consumption with its own consumption. And the Belt and Road Initiative has been building up economies so that they can consume their goods. But rather than destroying them and telling them, you have to follow our economic models and we destroy competition, they've been making partners with countries through the Belt and Road Initiative. So they're going to be fine. But they need you to believe in this narrative that China is going to be affected and America is going to win. This is just execution of a strategy that's already... Trump is not dumb. The Trump administration is not dumb. He's doing the bidding of smarter people that have already moved the capital. And this is the new multipolar world order. Small companies can't afford the tariffs. They'll be wiped out. Large companies will negotiate reliefs and get better deals, and they're global. Wealth will basically transfer to the large corporations, as we said. Government will do corrupt deals, and wash, rinse, repeat. It's a wealth transfer. That's all it is. It's not Main Street's turn. If you listen to them, it's going to be a thing. It is a controlled demolition, and I've seen it before because I saw it with my country that I left, UK. And I've seen it with the European Union. And I'm seeing what they're doing to America as well. The sooner you can realize that it needs a monetary reform, not a tax reform, the better you can prepare yourself accordingly. At the same time as all this happening, in the Bitcoin section, I always said, we've got record high inflows into Bitcoin ETFs for 13 days now. So the banks had all got into Bitcoin. They're into Bitcoin. The Trump administration, they're all into Bitcoin. The central banks are into gold while this is all happening. And then what is Trump's deal? He's strong-arming the country that was sacrificed for America through its foreign occupation with the Bank of Japan. The Bank of Japan is saying, we put up rates which crashed the US stock market as a beta test a few months ago. But we decided not to focus on our people and control inflation. We decided to keep the rates low. And then what is Japan doing now? The Japan is saying, we're the only country left that is increasing our purchase of US Treasuries. We got over $1 trillion of these buggers. Trump, give us an exemption from these tariffs by selling our treasuries. And then when Japan starts realigning with the ASEAN countries and the BRICS countries and the GCC countries, Trump can say, I was doing it for you. There, we're trying to make America great again. So all of this is about plausible deniability. And we're saying we won't make any exceptions for Japan. So they can say the market was crashed because of Japan, not because of us. Trump comes out and says any country buying from Iran cannot do business with the US. You know, this is essentially saying, let's set up the game to weaken the dollar, create as much volatility, set up stable coins, go short the dollar, long Bitcoin, and set up an almighty pump and dump throughout the Trump administration while Main Street gets completely wiped out for Wall Street. And then the manufacturing base for the strategic things that our corporations and banks want to be made in America, they'll all be done by robotics. The same robotics that requires rare earth minerals that we're going to try and steal from Ukraine. We might try and do something in Greenland, but probably we're just going to buy them from China anyway, because there won't be any tariffs there. Because this was all theater, and this was all a game based upon an alternative to World War III, because a couple of games were played geopolitically, and those games were lost. And so in part 3, this week in geopolitics, I'm going to help you understand the impact of tariffs and how I got ahead of this and how I was able to warn people on Bitcoin Hard Talk on conspiracy theories. Because all I did was follow the money, understood the game theory, and prepared my audience for that, and tried to warn as many people as possible and give them solutions while they're fighting, saying, you're an agent for Russia, or you're an agent for China, or you're a Hamas terrorist, rather than actually listening and recognizing what's happened here. So if you're enjoying this, we got one more section this week in geopolitics. And in this week in geopolitics, we're going to go through following the money of the Trump tariffs and the geopolitical impact, and why all of a sudden the military industrial complex is setting up a new game between Pakistan and India. And we're not going to follow it, because if you've been watching my content, you are very wise now and you recognize the patterns. You know where the funding comes from these Islamist terrorists. It comes from the Americans, the military industrial complex, and banks that are paying people that have nothing to do with the religion to weaponize the religion, so that they can then play the games of utilizing convenient narratives to inspire hate, so that when they want to do their open border policies from all the wars that they create, they can create civil unrest for you and transition you to a surveillance state, because you don't have a government that cares about you. You have banks that own America. And who do they sell those assets to? They sold them to Saudi Arabia and the GCC. They sold them to China and BRICS. Most of American assets are actually controlled by the same money that was being extracted this whole time. And it wasn't because of the politicians. It's because that's how the system was set up. And all of those politicians were complicit in the deception to make you think that the American dream meant that you take on some more credit card, you go deep in debt, you go fight for a war that for the military industrial complex, you come back mentally ill, you come back homeless, and we'll give you some alcohol and heroin and drugs that the CIA is importing, and we might do some human trafficking so that you get addicted to OnlyFans, so that you no longer have children, while we're building a technocracy and dehumanizing. And we're told that that's conspiracy theories, when you actually can see, if you read the book Operation Gladio, exactly how these operations were set up in the first place to launder money via Vatican Bank, through the intelligence that works for the corporate interest, and the central banks that work in the bank's interests in order to asset strip the countries and create forever wars to prop up their illegal criminal organizations and pretend that governments are in control while they install politicians. So for that reason, in part 3, we're going to be doing This Week in Geopolitics. Do me a favor. If you are watching, I would like you to share this information with as many people as possible. Look, when it's positive, I'll give you the positivity. The positive thing is you can totally protect yourself. But if you bury your head in the sand, it will be a negative world. There can only be peace with truth. You can only have preparation based upon a truthful narrative. If you want positivity, then positivity will wipe you out because Trump will give you all the positivity in the world. Your politicians will give you all the positivity that you're looking for, but you need to be smarter if you want to be prepared because the battle is against them. They're not looking out for you. And so this week in geopolitics, I'll tell you what they're willing to do to you in order to wipe you out in countries where still these forever wars are being done for profit. So like, share, subscribe, help me get up to 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. Then I'll get my blue check, and then more people can see the message. I'm going to take a little bit of water and then we'll go into part 3.